It's your favourite scary movie. For many, it's the 1996 hit Scream, one of the defining horrors of the 90s. Of course, like the many slashers that it satirised, Wes Craven's self-aware slasher has gone on to spawn several sequels. While Wes is sadly no longer with us, the sixth entry has just dropped this year. Directed now by the duo Tyler Gillett and Matt Bittnell-Olpin, aka Radio Silence, who took over with Part 5, Part 6 takes it from the comfortable location of Woodsboro off to the big, vast metropolis that is New York City. Well, we've done all the other films in this show, so we figured we'd do this one as well. Joining me tonight, as usual, are my beloved co-hosts, Mr. Alistair Yule and Jim Lamming. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
And let's see what we made of Scream 6.
You got a problem here, guy?
Scream 6. Now, Alistair, before we get to the real meat of this show, you weren't with us when Screams 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were covered on here. So just wondering briefly what your kind of relationship with the series is. Have you always been a fan of Scream?
It's like the Shaun of the Dead of the slasher series. It is taking the piss out of movie formula. It is meta. It acknowledges the procedures and the architecture of the plots of these movies, but it's also trying to be one at the same time. So I don't want to say it's like having your cake and eating it, because I say Shaun of the Dead there, which was a very good meta zombie film, one of my favourite films. I thoroughly enjoy it. With Scream, it's gone from the single movie to now entering franchise territory. The sequels have to get more and more specialised, and the second film has to pick apart sequels whilst being one, and then the trilogy picked apart trilogies. Do you know what I mean? And then you get to a point where, we're at Scream 6 now, and I think one of the issues with this franchise is that it's trying to be meta, and the longer the films go on for, the less and less material it's actually going to have to pick at. Because how many film series actually goes on for 6 films? Fun fact, according to Wikipedia, as of August this year, there is a 7th Scream film in production. So they're limited now to ripping the piss out of probably the Star Trek films and Police Academy.
Scream 5 did quite a good job of sort of commenting on the revival. This was the requel they were referring to it as. And Scream 6 doesn't really have that to hang on to. Scream 6 does quite an admirable job, however, of being yet another horror film about trauma that doesn't really... It doesn't handle it as clumsily as, say, Smile, which we did a couple of episodes ago. You know, it roots the plot in the sort of emotional response of the characters to things that have happened before. It's very much a stuck in the past kind of film. It's about recovery from the past. It's about finding a whole new reason to live. But at the same time, it's not doing this in a way where there's the obvious metaphor, if you excuse the overly literal bit of, let me go, and then she has to let her go because she trusts Tara. It seems to be less about movies than the previous ones, I would say.
Well, this one seems to be about franchises, and then going meta about what you do when you reach this point in the franchise.
Because I think that's the expansion on 5, because 5 was basically like, we've got the legacy characters and we've got the new characters, and then this one's like, all right, we can create a sense of danger now because the legacy characters can die, and now so can the main characters, because by this point where none of them do, admittedly, we go straight into spoilers.
This kind of makes this film a bit of a wet squid. We could do the dangerous, meaningful thing, but we won't.
Let's come to that in a wee bit, Evo. Overall, the main thing this is doing, the main thing this is adding to the franchise, is this new location. Guys, did you like New York? I know it's not really New York, but did you like New York City as a location for it? What about you, Jim? What are your thoughts?
it wouldn't be the first disappointing sequel to be set in New York, would it?
Most of it's Superman.
I, I just think in general, regardless of where it was set, it just didn't really hit the spot for me. I mean, this is coming off another disappointing sequel in the franchise, which, granted, 5 wasn't entirely terrible. It had some great moments, but it just slowly veered downhill from the halfway point. Whereas this one didn't even seem to get to a peak, if you ask me. Yeah, I don't. This could have been set on the moon, and it wouldn't have been that great. I think the setting is just to try and entice people back. It's going to be different, but ultimately it wasn't.
The reason I want to focus on the setting first is because I think that is the main new part, because now, rather than being set in the suburbs, there's an intensity to the action scenes in this, or at least in some of them, because we're set in small flats. I thought that added a new dimension to it. And it was also quite nice to sort of take some of the iconography and take it to like a deserted city street, or like, say, the underground bit. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, to cut to the jugular actually with this one, I actually quite liked this film. I thought this is probably a better film than Part 5. Part 5, I had a problem with some of the character work. I thought with Sam in particular, we find her after the most interesting stuff's happened. This was a film about two sisters reconnecting, but we needed to see that sort of darkness in her that apparently she had to like run away from Tara because of. And we did get to see that a bit more here. I think the characterization was stronger in this one. And I thought that the core 4, as they're now known, they felt like they could carry a movie in their own right. In fact, I would actually argue that Gail Weathers was one massive distraction in this film.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, they've got rid of pretty much every other legacy character, as they say.
Except Neve Campbell, who didn't come back because she wasn't being offered whatever amount of money she was asking for. She made the point that the amount of money they were offering her was disproportionately low compared to the amount of money she'd bring into the franchise. I'm a big fan of actors getting paid for the work they put into a franchise, but I also am actually glad Sydney wasn't in this film, because we have far too many returning characters. We have the main 4, we have Gail coming back into it, we have Kirby coming back into this one as well.
Which was one of the problems for the previous film as well.
Yeah.
Like, if you ask me, Sydney didn't even need to be in that one. But not Gail, really, because we're on a new generation of kids, I suppose. And this is their story as opposed to everyone else's. I know it all ties into each other. We've got all these meta references throughout each film. I mean, this series is tiring itself out of referencing itself over and over again. And to keep dragging people back from the previous ones, this time around, I just felt battered into the ground by it all.
I was okay with it in 5 because it had a passing the torch element to it. Because they sort of tied the motive into toxic fandom, then I quite like the idea of here's the characters that they sort of love, that they want to see again. And then here's the new cast that are going to be taking it off in a new direction. Also, Billy coming back, that was the worst thing in Part 5, was these forced bits of going, oh, yeah, I know we just said that Billy was a rapist in this film, but hey, you might be happy when you see Skeet coming back on, right? And that just kind of detracted from whatever they were trying to do with that. You've got Sam surrounded by people she could take inspiration from, but instead decides to take it off her rapist dad. But,
yeah, when he appeared again, she's looking in that display case. And my initial reaction, as I've written down here, was, oh, fuck off. In the mirror again. I thought we'd done with that in the previous film. That demon had been exercised, but we've got to bring it up again in this one. I know it's mentioned in with the therapy session at the beginning, but yeah, I think this may be the part where it lost me altogether.
Yeah, it's done this thing again that number 5 did, of trying to draw a moral equivalency between their self-defense and the slashers. And whilst she does not need to stab him as often as she does by the end of the film, it's such a kind of cartoon world that seems like an appropriate response, because these aren't like realistic films about the consequences of violence. They're sort of like comedies, basically. In the universe of this takes place, and it's entirely acceptable to stab a person like 40 times in the arm or whatever. Obviously unacceptable in real life. We at Horror Cult Films would never condone acts of violence. But at the same time, with the universe that they've created, it's not got the impact they think it's going to because it's already a heightened reality.
I think with her having the history of she's the daughter of a serial killer, and he every now and then appears in a mirror, tempting her to kill in a serialized fashion. It's Tyrannosaurus Rex in the Jurassic Park movies. It's like the T-Rex would kill to eat for sustenance, and that's indiscriminate. However, in the films, it just happens to kill all the bad guys conveniently. And that seems to be like she will have this inner conflict of stabbing these guys innumerable times, and it's certainly impactful scenes. And you can't deny that the individuals that she does stab certainly are receiving a dose of their own medicine. But it's interesting to have that challenge if she could become this. But that's an interesting ingredient that was not in the previous few movies.
Yeah, I think it would have landed more if the tone had been darker. But actually, something I loved about this one, which I thought would have been interesting, is the opening sequence, right, where we've got Samara Weaving being killed when she's going out on what she thinks is going to be a date. And then once she's offed, the killer then takes off his mask. And I thought, oh, wow, are we going to get a Scream film, which is all told from a killer's perspective? No, that would have been the case.
Yeah, that's what I was expecting. After Samara Weaving gets stabbed a few times, we see it just kind of linger on the killer. And I did think for a second, oh, are they going to take the mask off already? And they did. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So then we follow the killer home, who then just happens to bump into one of the main characters on the way home. So, oh, yeah, I'll see you at the party later. So, oh, where's this going? And then it turns out, I assume the killer has a boyfriend, the way they speak to each other, and they're both in it together. It's clear they're obsessed with the stab films, and they want to finish a film, it's mentioned. So I assume the previous stab film got cancelled or whatever. And then he gets the phone call from who he assumes is his other half. And then after a bit of back and forth and wandering around, it turns out he's in the fridge in pieces. And then the killer's behind him. And that's when I thought, oh, no, okay, we're sticking to formula. It's just another clever opening, a bit like number 4.
There's quite a nice little gag there with the guy being called Jason and, of course, the head being the fridge, like what happens in Friday the 13th Part 2. With finishing the movie, I didn't take that as a comment on Stab. I took that as like the idea that these characters see themselves as characters in a movie, essentially.
And creating a new one, yeah.
Yeah, like for them, it's going, the story needs to be finished. And for the story to be finished, Tara and Sam both need to get offed, basically. And justice for Richie, etc. But I think as far as the sort of setup goes, yeah, it was a relatively typical one. I guess where we did maybe have a slight difference in the focus was that they were going out hunting towards the end. They were going out hunting the killer, which I don't think's happened in the franchise before. It's usually them waiting for the killer to come along. By the way, did you guys clock the killer early on?
I had my suspicions. I think Hot Neighbor Guy, who is pretty much just referred to as that, isn't he?
Literally, yeah, he is.
I think he was basically lined up as a red herring for the entire thing.
But he stunk so much of red herring.
Yeah,
He could do an advert for an aftershave called Red Herring. Did I do it? Maybe.
That was clearly his role. And I think the more the film went on, the clearer it was that maybe it isn't him. I know they have an accomplice normally in these, but yeah, the more the film went on, the less I suspected it was him. But there's always that rug pull. The policeman probably seemed the most suspect throughout, because he seemed quite shady. But then also Kirby appearing out of nowhere and acting a little gingerly about everything. But I knew it was never going to be
her.
No. But had my suspicions it was the cop, but obviously, once his kid was supposedly killed, I thought, oh well, that's that because she's dead, and he wouldn't kill his own kids. So.
Yeah, see, I didn't think that she was dead just because we didn't see the actual cut. We just saw the body coming out. Although for some reason, despite him saying like, yes, you never fuck with a man's family, or whatever he says, whatever that line was, which is the big clue line, and then we go, oh, he's something Richie later. At the same time, it never occurred to me that he was also the killer, despite that he was the one who said she was dead. But I knew that she was going to be one of the killers, and I was just waiting for the long baited return of Stu, which still hasn't happened in the franchise.
I would have probably preferred that reveal over what we got. That would have been much more satisfying because it just felt really flat. Come the reveal, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, really?
It's a thing of the cluttered narrative, because again, like with 5, where we had so many different characters in it that the killers didn't really get much airtime. And then in this one, they still didn't. Like, I mean, Ethan's in it, like, he probably gets about 3 or 4 scenes that we really see him. And Quinn's only in it for the first little bit. So we are left going, all right, is it Hot Neighbor Guy? Or is it Kirby? And as Alistair said, big red herring.
His deodorant of choice.
The film would basically be cancelled if it was Kirby. All the fans love her. So.
I have to say that during my watch through of texting David at the time with my suspicions as to who they were, I had 4 guesses. And I would have it a guess and then renege, guess again, renege on that one. Like Kirby was she was my wrong one. I was absolutely floored when I found out that 3 of my guesses were correct. So it's Quinn, the father, Wayne Bailey, and Ethan, and all 3 of them turned up. And I only ruled out Quinn because she, quote unquote, died. I just want to just take a time out just for 2 seconds to really think about the mechanics of her death. Right, we have a scene that is sort of hailing back to the first Halloween film where Laurie Strode is on the phone with her friend and she's making what you think are sex noises, but she's actually getting attacked by Mike Myers, and they recreate that year early on. It's set up with Quinn sleeping with this man who, I forget the name, she comes out and says, who's that in there with you, Gary? And then the guy's voice in the background shouts out, who's Gary?
Oh, yeah, that's a good bit.
She's making those noises in the bedroom. And then later on, it's set up that she's making similar noises in the bedroom again, and nobody's concerned with it because they just think she's with him. She's entertaining a gentleman friend in her bedroom, and it turns out that, oh no, she's getting knifed to death by Ghostface. Bearing in mind, from retroactively knowing this from the end reveal, that Ghostface has to be, if it's not Quinn herself, it's either her father or her brother. One of those 2 guys dressed up as Ghostface to fake her death, and she had to make those noises. Bit weird. It's
yes,
bit weird.
Yeah. That is a strange one.
Then we get the picture that's airdropped to everyone in the apartment, and it appears to be from the point of view of Hot Neighbor. So did he take the photo to try and tell everyone that there's someone in the building? Or did that come from the other killer?
It could have, because there were 2 other killers. We have 3 Ghostfaces. I mean, reasonably, it could have been the other one, but
but
sometimes these things don't always.
If it was the neighbor doing it as a warning to everyone else in there, why didn't he just call the police rather than, I know, I'll just stop, take a photo. Right, let's find everyone's Bluetooth signature on here, and it just seemed a bit odd.
I know what you mean.
I know, like, it takes into consideration current technology and stuff like that. It has done throughout the years, but yeah, it just felt a bit daft.
See that as a very sad commentary on police response times in New York.
Although the paramedics got to Gale very quickly.
Didn't they? Yeah.
The police in this were absurd. I mean, keeping in mind the police here decide to give Detective Bailey all sorts of evidence from crimes that were committed 30 years ago in a different city. Like, there's no way that he'd get access to that. they also didn't seem to go, oh, do you think maybe this is about Detective Bailey since Richie's his son? Something that Sam did not seem to know anything about her boyfriend's family. But let's be positive about this film here. I reckon there's a level of intensity about this one that the others have lacked, because like this was by far the most violent in the series. Now, maybe I'm getting older. Maybe I'm becoming soft of age, but I remember the cinema watching this and thinking, oh, I feel like a bit of a sadist here. Like, especially that ladder sequence, where we're going between the two apartments. That was a really
so
good set
funny.
piece.
So that's the wrong response. I mean, it's so obvious she's going to die.
Oh, I thought that was nasty. I was like, that's
I thought it was going to be a little more gruesome. Seems she was pretty much gutted in the living room.
So her falling like 7 stories and then hitting her head off of a dumpster, that's not enough for you, Jim?
Well, it's not that it wasn't enough for me. It's that a moment earlier,
should have been the 8th
she'd
story.
been stabbed from stomach to chest, and then was climbing over a ladder several stories.
Don't forget, the knife was also twisted, which happens a lot in this film.
Yeah. As I say, I was just expecting all the insides to spill out while she was climbing across the
fair play.
ladders, but maybe it wasn't quite as
she
gross
needed to button up.
Yeah.
I think it was partially helped by the intensity of the scene before, which is again the small apartment slashing sequence, which we've never had so far. That was cool. The other things that I was a bit of a fan of in this, I thought the sisters' relationship was, as I said earlier, fundamentally far more interesting, on the grounds that rather than seeing them as estranged sisters, now we're seeing them as trying to retain, or at least Tara retaining, an independent life from the sister that she previously was like, oh, Sam's never around. Sam sodded off, and Sam's like, all right, well, now I'm here, and I'm not going to leave. And I thought that was quite an interesting dynamic. I also quite liked the way that they did handle the trauma aspect when she's going, like, it's a line where she goes, are you okay? And then she smiles and says no, as if, how we can talk about this, because the whole thing was about that Tara wasn't facing up to what happened. Well, Sam's going, oh, I actually quite enjoyed it. What she says, it felt right when she's asked about stabbing a guy 22 times and then slitting his throat. I thought that was quite well handled. Again, like how someone responds after a slasher film is not a particularly new thing, but I did like that they sort of explored the more complex emotions of survival in this one. Same way to an extent with Gale as well. We did see Gale had a new partner. He was completely superfluous, but yeah.
He died. In the background, one of the ghost faces snuck out. Which one of the ghost faces do you suppose that was? You see, all interchangeable. 3 for 3.
It's getting to the point.
2 3s.
You've already mentioned one of the Cornetto films. We're getting to the point where it's almost Hot Fuzz, aren't we?
Timothy Dalton.
We've got one round every corner.
Timothy Dalton from Hot Fuzz in a Scream film. Sign me up. Sold.
As much as I also didn't like seeing so many returning characters, I did think it was quite fun seeing the sort of back and forth between Gale and Kirby. That was a lot of fun.
Kirby, she and the Sam Carpenter character, I found like they first see each other, and then there's the musical twang of all friends together, and then they hug. Like, we've never seen these. The audience has not seen these two characters together before. So we get the explanation of, she was a senior when I was a fresher.
Yeah.
Which I still don't buy, frankly. Okay, fine. They know each other. We're linking into the... there's a lot of legacy characters that survived this film. Like, we get more ghost faces, but like no legacy deaths. Like these 3 ghost faces were incompetent. At least Jack Quaid or the girl Amber Freeman from the previous film, at least they managed to get rid of Dewey.
Yeah, I didn't like that the way that Gale survived. I either would have just killed Gale off and just not add her in it at all. Like, the thing is going, all right, Gale's there and she survived. It's a bit like with Part 4, where Part 4 felt like to sell the killer, they really needed to kill off one of the main 3, particularly as it was at the time we were like, oh, this is going to be a whole new kind of spin-off. This will be a whole new trilogy. It wasn't a new trilogy. It ended up not having a sequel for like however many years between 4 and 5. But at the same time, like you have to have that sense of danger. Wes Craven was a big fan of saying you have to fear the directors. Why he wanted to kill off a famous actor in the beginning of Scream 1. And we just don't really fear the directors of these ones. It's a bit like with Game of Thrones, in episode 3 of season 8 with the Long Night one, where the characters have plot armor that basically keeps them alive even when they shouldn't be, because we get a hell of a lot of bits where, like, when Kirby gets stabbed from behind, or she gets shot, in fact. We've got...
I actually want to challenge you on that one and call that a false equivalence, for the simple fact that what they would do in season 8 of Game of Thrones is, here's a character, whether it's Sam Tarly or Brienne of Tarth, they're swarmed with zombies, they're about to die. We cut away to something else happens, we cut back to our beloved characters. Oh, they're still killing zombies, and they're fine, they survive. Kirby got stabbed, and, like, you see that she's in a lot of pain. It's not Game of Thrones season 8.
Kirby was also shot, and Chad was stabbed like 20 times.
Hey, another man got tasered in the testicles, so...
I mean...
Do you think he survived the film? I mean, some people, when they accidentally taser themselves in the balls, they have heart attacks. But I don't want to go political with the January 6th uprising.
Well, there was no mask left at the scene, so I think it's safe to assume he got away with that one.
A minute's silence for that man's testicles.
I did quite like the sequence where Gail almost died, however. This chase in the apartment was very good. There is no way the killer would know she's never had a call before, since it's a different killer for each one.
No, this is one of those, like, this is for the benefit of the audience scenes, as we all know. There's no way the killer would have known that. Although it was actually quite a bit of a pleasure to just hear Roger L. Jackson's voice throughout the series for what a fun job you've got. No matter who takes up the mantle of Ghostface, you get to say all the cool lines. And, he's getting to say the lines. By the way, Ghostface is kind of falling behind the times. This is someone dressing up in a way that deprives you of field of vision. You have no peripheral vision. Can you have peripheral vision wearing a ghost mask? I don't think you can. I meant to say ghost face mask. And then you're wielding a knife, and all of your victims are armed with handguns. Masks off to the ghost face villains in this series, because they're punching up.
Yeah, it's a series that, quite interestingly, like, the series will regularly sort of make fun of itself because it's doing a genre that's no longer in vogue. It's still doing slashers, and an age where slashers are kind of seen as a bit irrelevant. So I like that aspect of it. Although it is a bit strange to see them occasionally pay lip service to elevated horror in huge speech marks, but at the same time not really use the language of elevated horror. Like, at least when they started to do this with found footage and remakes in the previous ones, they did incorporate those into the story. Whereas this one, it's like they acknowledge horror has moved on, but they don't really talk about what horror is right now.
You get that big monologue of, establishing what the rules are again.
Yeah.
And it just seemed for nothing. It's like the takeaway was, don't trust anyone. It could be any of them, and it was two of them at least that were with them at the time. But it just went off on one about franchises and who can be in them and stuff. But for me, I think just it got far too self-referential far too often, which in the first film, is great because it's a refreshing send of the genre. And the second, you're riding on that wave. It's still quite amusing. But now we're at number 6, come on.
The bit where they find a shrine to the first movie was quite cringy. And then, like, we got this sort of knowing dialogue of, like, I built a tribute to my son, in this case, the son representing the franchise. I was like, ugh. But What can I say? By this point, you know what we're getting. I did quite like the way they incorporated a real thing into this again, which was the hounding that Melissa Barrera got after the first movie. So she ended up having to leave Twitter because she was getting constant death threats and like racialized abuse from folk. And they also incorporated that into the story, which is about how Sam was getting dogpiled because everyone thought that she was the killer. So it felt like they were bringing the self-referential nature to the world outside the film as well. But at the same time, I thought that at least added something because I think one of the strengths of these ones versus the first four is the core four are a lot more realistic as characters than the original cast were. Like the first Scream, all the young folk just watch as complete psychopaths nowadays, including Sydney. You know, where it's like, all right, someone's died, and they're like, haha, like no one gives a shit about any of the stuff that's happening around him because it's making a comment of, well, this is an exaggerated version of teenagers that watch slasher films. To them, the lines between fantasy and reality are so blurred. But because the slasher age was so long ago, they don't really do that this time. I think the characters are more rounded. They do feel more like people you could meet. I mean, Mindy, I guess, is a replacement that we have for Randy. Although the scene where her and Kirby both had to sort of geek out together was nice. But at the same time, Mindy feels real and vulnerable in a way that Randy never really did. Like Randy was kind of this kind of almost too smart ass for the series. But then I suppose that's also because the series, by this point, we know its language already. So it's not going to be doing another complete Randy again.
It feels like a natural progression. Basically, from the first film, it's talking about slasher films and the formula. It's like if a magician explained how the trick is done and then did the trick for the audience. I mean, this is the movie equivalent of that, the Scream franchise. The first film did that. And then if you're going to have layers of meta slinking into your movie, it'd be natural to add more layers to that when the franchise progresses. So talking about not just the directors, actors, producers, and writers behind a movie, but to then include the audience in that meta aspect as well. It for this franchise feels a natural development, and certainly by the time you reach part 6 in any series, you feel free to swing for the fences.
You know, maybe part of my disappointment was my expectation, because as you say, we're at part 6, and that opening did, get my hopes up for it going in a different direction, maybe freshening things up a bit. But ultimately, we just got the same thing over again, just maybe slightly different, slightly more modern take, but otherwise, I just felt we were just waiting for the Scooby-Doo moment for far too long.
That's actually so good. There's a definite Scooby-Doo element to these films.
What do we think of the subway scene? Because the subway scene, we've got a few horror icons there. We have the Babadook, we have the Untethered, we have Michael, we have Pinhead, we have, I think, someone from The Grudge. I thought that subway scene was cool. I thought that was one of the times that really did justify the change of location, that this couldn't just
We
have
also
been set in Woodsboro.
Got a little nod to Ready or Not as well with one of the costumes.
Oh, okay, yeah, cool.
A wedding dress and a bullet belt.
I mean, aside from
Samara
Weaving.
You have Samara Weaving in it. I think one issue is when you cast a major character in these films and then you kill them off immediately and your franchise gets known for that. Like from Scream 2, Sarah Michelle Gellar is not going to make it because that plays the opposite of the role she played in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And of course, with Samara Weaving, you know that she is unfortunately the victim of this opening. Nitpick, that putrid yellow dress she was wearing, wasn't a fan. Not a comment on the actress or acting abilities. She nailed it. That dress, awful.
Yeah, because when she appeared in it, like I was like, all right, this is radio silence because they did Ready or Not. They've called in the favor, and then the dad from Ready or Not shows up as well as a therapist, right? So it's like, okay, cool, we're getting a nice bit of crossover. He's now in the Mission Impossible franchise as well.
I'd love to see Tom Cruise release films. How would Ethan Hunt handle Ghostface?
Well, the subway bit would have probably been a little more action filled.
Yeah, so the subway, as I was saying, right, I thought the subway, see, it all goes full circle. I thought the subway scene was really cool. That was one which did justify the switch of location. It was one which called upon, we're acknowledging the legacy of this film alongside other films within the canon, because it would make sense it had multiple ghost faces on this one, largely because, of course, the ghost face mask now exists in universe and is iconic in the universe as well. So I thought that was all really cool. And it was a nice bit of genuine tension about who the killers were. Because at that point, we're thinking, oh, it's totally Ethan. And then, obviously, it's not Ethan. You know, he goes in and she's like, oh, damn, I was wrong. For Mindy.
Yeah, that was strange, because if they did want to kill them off, why didn't he finish the job? Or were they doing that solely to throw them off the scent of him?
I don't know, because Mindy was ultimately stabbed by Quinn, but like everyone thinks Quinn's dead anyway. I mean, maybe it was so she could say the killer wasn't Ethan, but who would she say? Who would she say that to? Because all the others are supposed to be dead by that point anyway.
Yeah,
if the plan had worked.
And given that they were 10 minutes away from the reveal as well, I just find it odd that he left it to be seen to by the paramedics or whatever.
Something I did think they'd talk about a bit more is another big development in the field would be true crime. Because we did previously have that with part 4 when we had the book coming out. But it's such a new thing. I would have quite liked to see some like mad podcasters and stuff like that trying to get interviews and things and maybe stalking them.
It is briefly mentioned, but then almost immediately forgotten about.
Especially in a New York campus as well. Students love this kind of stuff. You know, all the young folks are always listening to these kind of rape and murder podcasts. So yeah, missed potential. Anyway,
I want to talk very briefly about there's moments in these films that I love. That's when Ghostface, usually outing themselves, then starts they drop the pretense. Literally, you get the mask slip. I should have started with the mask slip. Anyway, they start acting like, we know we're the killer. And they become a lot more fun. The father in Scream 6 and Jack Quaid in Scream 5 and I'll get the actress's name who played Amber Freeman. She was really good when she did the mask slip. She holds the knife up and starts making the eek noises when she's like a psycho. Like, this is the in between when you have to pretend you're innocent and one of the victims, but before you get killed, you get the sweet spot where look at all the scenery around you. How hungry are you? How much do you want to chew this scenery? Get in there. They have those moments in the third act. I love those. Those are always fun. My favorite one that I fell in love with was Rebecca Gayheart of the first Urban Legend film. And when she revealed herself as the killer, nobody's quite chewed the scenery just like she did. Some have come close, but that's the first one I always remember when I thought, I'm enjoying this film now.
Yeah, they call that the evil voice when it's in murder mysteries. When we're going, oh yes, it was me, right? And they suddenly start going into the sort of Jesse Eisenberg, Lex Luthor impression. With Scream, Scream basically has
equivalent, but I don't have the energy to pick it apart.
With Scream, they have like one mode, and that's two modes. They have for a default mode, and then they have crazy. You don't have the killer who is also quite logical, or the killer who's like he's a bit psychopathic, but also sort of reserved. No, we're all very in your face once we've been revealed.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of love it. Let's move on to other little areas we think there could have been some potential. Now, well, that sounds so negative. I actually quite like this film.
They didn't stab enough people, David.
Yeah, I actually still quite like this film. Actually, another nitpick before I move on to a good bit. Right. See when they call Detective Bailey and they're like, someone's trying to kill us. Detective Bailey then goes, why do you come down to the station? I'm like, the balls of this guy. Someone goes, all right, someone's trying to kill us. Can we get a squad car? You go, yes. Or you offer him a squad car. You don't go, oh, someone's trying to kill you, eh? Well, why don't you come to the safety of the police station? Like when we get into the shop, the police show up pretty much straight away. So it's not like they're out of police wagons. It's just for the story to function at all. The characters can't just ask for a ride to the police station. They have to walk there. And that irritated the absolute hell out of me, considering that they are now potentially going to die.
I want to call a few things that they get right was setting Amber Freeman character on fire, which was a direct homage to Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Same actress, same death, almost. I would actually say the Scream 5 version was actually toned down from Quentin Tarantino's movie. I want to give a shout out to Kyle Gallner, who played Vince Schneider in Scream 5. He was, as you'll recall, because it was the three of us that did the Smile podcast not too long ago. He was the former love interest of the lead in Smile. He's the guy who dies in a car park. He gets the headlights turn on whilst he's outside having a piss. There's a moment he looks around, the car backs up, there's nobody in the car, knife in the neck. It was a quick, clean, efficient kill. He nailed it. It nailed him.
As a wee story of this, when Alistair was watching number 6, he's telling me going, I don't think I've seen 5. Read the Wikipedia page, and absolutely none of this is jumping out at me at all.
Descriptions in our WhatsApp group chat. It's like I have not seen this. Yeah, none of this was ringing a bell.
Like 25 minutes in, going, I've seen this movie. I was like, must have left quite an impression on you.
Yeah, I started remembering bits as it went along, and so, oh wait, I have seen this film.
So how do we reckon this compares to 5? Because I personally like this more. I think it's much more interesting in terms of where it puts the characters. It does lose something in that I thought that 5, by grounding the motive in nostalgia and fandom, I think it was dealing with something very contemporary, which this one is trying to do something that's more character driven. And I don't know that it's as much fun, but I did find it ultimately more rewarding.
See, I just don't think it's as much fun. While 5 isn't, the greatest of the bunch, it does know to have fun as well. They play with the dinner, so to speak. As Alistair just mentioned, you've got the fire at the end, the bit in the car park. To name a few, you've got some of the old tropes like the fridge door being closed. Is there someone behind it? Silly things like that. But it does go a bit downhill once they stop having fun with the kills. And with this one, I just felt it was flat throughout. I quite liked the bit in the bodega. That was quite fun, but it was very fleeting. Ghostface with a shotgun was something new. But otherwise, it lacked the thrills of the other films. I feel like if they're sticking to formula, they at least need to make it fun. And it just wasn't.
Alistair, do you have a strong preference in 5v6?
There's elements to them where they're sort of both kind of swings and misses, but they do actually have fun, and they are what you'd expect from a Scream film. Plenty of characters scream. There's one of my favorite deaths in Scream 6 is the therapist, because on the TV, there's a knock at the door on the TV, the guy in the television shouts, they're here already. And as he gets up to go, it's over for you. Like literally spelling out in the most unsubtle way what's happening. The guy knocked, it's clearly Ghostface. It's the door's frosted glass, so you can see there's a shadow on the other side, and then the outline of Ghostface, and he gets so close as to get knifed in the nose. Who gets knifed in the nose? That was a fun death. That was a very happy end of therapy. Our time is up for the therapist.
Yeah, I enjoyed that part.
It had fun. This is not your avant-garde cinema, but I had fun with it. Yeah.
One of my favorite lines in it, notwithstanding the issues with Gale being in it, but the line of, you'd have been a great killer, Gale. Sydney would have made no sense, and Dewey was a fan favourite. So I thought that was quite good.
Mm.
And there was a lot of fans going, oh, maybe it will be Gale's time. Maybe she's been driven mad by all this, because
You get
essentially...
to have the fact that there's the in-universe cinematic history that is following the murders of this just called Stab. And I wonder if there will ever... You remember The Sopranos, when they do the film Cleave? Go on.
Cleaver, yeah.
Cleaver was it. Let's have an in-universe crossover. Go on, Hollywood, make it happen. You can do it.
I did love with number 5, and they said that the one that made them turn violent and kill people to make it better was the one directed by Ryan Johnson. That was quite amusing. Did not really get a whole lot of mentions in this one.
There was the little shrine in the opening bit, because when Jason returns back to his apartment to put his mask away, he opens a cupboard and there's all posters there and other masked like dummies to put it on. And I guess there's the whole monument to the kills. Well, they play Rich's films that he's made himself, but otherwise, no, it's pretty much just referring back to the actual murders themselves as opposed to the films.
Folks, should we move on to star ratings? Has anyone else got any big things they want to bring up about this one?
No, let's go for it.
Actually, it's one last one I'd like to bring up. It was a question about Kirby. What did we think of her as an FBI agent? At first, when I watched it, I just didn't buy it. I was like, Kirby would be making movies. She wouldn't be an FBI agent. But then I did like it on rewatch. I thought, you know what? The fans wanted her to come back. She's a beloved character, quite badass. It was good to see her in an active position rather than just being another victim in these films. But I was also like, can you be 30 and be the FBI at that level?
She does have to point out at one point that she is 30. And she's still quite very young looking. They were wrong to call that plausible 30-year-old. Let's rephrase that. Plausible FBI agent? No, I don't see that happening. But I do like that the villain did his research and found out that she was actually fired 3 months ago. So on that basis, you don't know what she got fired from.
But was that a ruse from the villain to convince everyone else not to trust?
I thought that was a ruse.
But yeah, I think it seems unlikely for her to be an FBI agent because they want us to
I'd have preferred
that's the case.
I'd have preferred her as like a Miss Marple type character. So starts doing their own investigations.
I think it just
sense.
Wanted to have us be a bit more suspicious about the character more than anything. Because, FBI are usually portrayed as stiff suit guys or the ones that are die hard, that sort of thing. So, I think it's just to make us a little, this is sketchy. But I think the character returning and surviving again is quite possibly this one taking the mantle of Dewey. Yeah. But to appeal to maybe a younger audience or the next generation of fans, I suppose, because she came along, about 2010-ish, and did become a fan favourite, and everyone else is getting old as hell now, so got to pass these along to some other fan favourites instead.
And generally speaking, do you guys find yourselves caring much about the sisters? So I generally did on rewatch a lot more than I did first time. I think first time I watched them, it was, again, the thing that made it different for me was I felt like the darker aspect to Sam's character they hinted at in the first one did get to come out a little bit more here. And I just sort of thought there seemed a bit more kind of meat on the bone there thematically in terms of what we're doing. But at the same time, Jenny Ortega still steals the show. Although Sam is the protagonist, I would still say that Tara is the one that you pay more attention to. I think that's just, she's got a hell of a lot of charisma.
Yeah, I hope the sisters get their trilogy. Hope we get one more with those two in the lead.
But going back to what Alistair said about the mask slipping in the finale, I felt that's where they were at their best as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
slightly unhinged. Just
Look-
going
look-
for it.
Looks like you're down another brother.
Yeah.
That's a good line.
And yeah, that's where the film became fun for me, is that ending. Prior to that, it just did take itself far too seriously for me.
Let's move on to star ratings. So, as far as this one goes, personally, my star rating for this, 3.5. It's slightly better than number 5. Number 5, I loved first time. Second time I watched it, I was like, fuck. There's a lot of things that just didn't work in it. That happened to be the one we recorded it after I'd seen it twice. I think this is better than probably most of them, except for 1 and 4.
I'm gonna go with a 3 as well. I know I've not had a lot of good things to say about it, but it wasn't completely terrible, and it was definitely better than Scream 3. I would say it's on par with 5 in terms of quality. I thought that one was a bit more fun, but I guess some of the, as you said, more visceral parts of it were a lot more eye-popping than previous films, and some of the characters were pretty cool. But yeah, it doesn't hold a candle to the first one or number 4.
And Alistair, what are your thoughts? What's your star rating?
I'll go for a 2. I'll rate 5 and 6. I'll give them both 3 stars. I enjoy them. It's my expectations. I'm not expecting Christopher Nolan wizardry when I'm watching these films. I'm just expecting a bit of fun. A few people are going to die. There's going to be a few good punchy one-liners. My expectations were met on both occasions. So 3 stars.
Yeah, it is worth mentioning that most franchises, especially slasher franchises, which really don't lend themselves to recurring characters all that often, this blows things like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6 and Halloween 6 out of the water. So that's the least thing it's got going for it. I reckon 20 years from now, when people look back at Scream, we probably will not fondly remember it's a franchise because of just how long there were between entries. And I think the first one will tower above all the others. But at the same time, I don't think people will be ashamed of Scream 5 or 6. I think these are both quite good, and it makes me excited about Part 7. But anyway, let's move on like the filmmakers are. We're going to our list. It's list time. Now, Mr. Jim Lamming has himself a list here. Me and Dal have no idea what was this going to be, what's going to be on it, or anything like that. Jim, what's your list?
This list is from Screen Rant, and in honor of Scream 6, very original, we've gone for horror films set in New York. So it's a top 10. Looking at the order, I'm not sure what the top 10 is based on, but I'm not sure it's quality of the films.
The most New York.
Give or take 1 or 2. But yeah, there's going to be some obvious ones in there, so go for it.
Is one of these Jason Takes Manhattan?
Yes, it is. It's number 10 on the list.
One, of course, we all joke barely features New York, but cool. It's mostly in a boat.
Just want to say Ghostbusters because it has some horror elements to it.
No, but I would probably have put Ghostbusters in place of maybe one of these films here. But no, unfortunately not.
Is Maniac in it?
Maniac is not.
What? Oh, it's mental. I'm not playing any longer. Okay, let's see. Gremlins, is that New York?
No.
Gremlins 2, sorry. Gremlins 2.
Yeah, that would be a good shout, but no, again, doesn't feature in the list.
This is some BS here.
I'll give you a clue. At least 2 of these films we've discussed before, and it is a very contemporary list as well.
Oh, Scream 6.
Scream 6 is on there at number 4.
Okay, when I say New York, by the way, is this New York City or some of this New York State?
I would say Manhattan, looking at this list.
Is American Psycho in there?
American Psycho sits on there at number 9.
Oh,
Okay.
So that's why I questioned some of the positions on this, considering they've put
Yeah.
Scream 6 at number 4 and that one's so low.
If this includes ones that we've done before, I reckon that probably includes Rosemary's Baby, I believe, is New York as well.
It does include Rosemary's Baby in probably its rightful place, right at the top of the list at number 1.
Good.
Oh, good shout.
Oh, okay. I think I'm starting to struggle now.
I want to say Hellraiser 3, but that's just clearly a generic American city.
That would be a good shout, actually. And whilst New York does play something of a character in the films we've discussed, maybe not so much in some of the others. It just happens to be where they're set.
Is the Midnight Meat Train? That would be on there,
Midnight
right?
Meat Train
It's
is
a
on the
subway.
list at number 7.
I don't know if we shot
It's
in
a-
New York, but it's definitely set in New York.
I think this came up on one of our lists previously, and I've got to say I still haven't seen it.
It's a Clive Barker one, that one.
With Mr. Vincent Jones as the killer. All right. So how many have we got so far? So we got Rosemary's Baby, we got Scream 6, we got American Psycho,
Friday the 13th, Part 8, Midnight Meat Train. So that leaves us with 5 left.
So one with the found footage in Cloverfield.
Cloverfield is in there at
good
number
one.
5. And I've got to be honest, I weren't a big fan of that one
I
myself.
wasn't particularly either. I just thinking of the old advert with the Statue of Liberty's head
Yeah.
comes down. I was like, York, we're here. Oh, are any of the Godzilla films on there as well?
They are not. I will give you a couple of clues. One is a Stephen King film set specifically in a hotel room.
Oh, it was room 1408.
Was that too easy of a clue, was it? Yeah, 1408, the
I'm
John
thinking of
Cusack film.
Think of a Stephen King constant reader, so he's always in the front of my mind.
Okay, and another one, although I guess there are horror themes, I would say it's kind of more of a legal film as well. Keanu Reeves.
Oh,
Devil's Advocate.
Yeah.
Devil's Advocate. Yeah, I've got to say, whenever someone mentions that, I always think of the Simpsons joke where Homer says, "Allow me to play Devil's Advocate for a moment," and then goes to play a pinball machine. It's called Devil's Advocate. Right, so 2 left.
Are these good films? Are you a fan of either of them?
I would say they're more psychological horrors than anything else.
Okay.
Not so much a slasher or anything like that. Definitely going towards more psychological issues than.
Oh, Jacob's
anything else.
Ladder.
Jacob's Ladder is on there at number 3. And if that wasn't an inspiration for Silent Hill, I don't know what was. And we've got one left, which is the number 2. And again, I really can't think of anything without giving the game away. It's Darren Aronofsky.
Tell us where it's set.
Oh, it's Black Swan.
Black
that was
Swan
his New York one, right?
Is at number 2.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have got that.
Oh well.
Black Swan could have been any city. I don't remember it being New
It
York.
could have been. You know, if someone asked me where it was set, I would have said in a ballet studio.
Just, well, exactly. Yeah.
Still, a
Primary
cracking
location.
film. Quite possibly, rightfully sits there at number 2. I would have definitely put American Psycho up higher. So from 10 to 1, we've got Friday the 13th, Part 8 at number 10. Number 9 is American Psycho. At number 8 is 1408. Number 7 is Midnight Meat Train. 6, The Devil's Advocate. At 5, we've got Cloverfield. 4, Scream 6. I mean, they're really rating that film highly. Number 3 is Jacob's Ladder. 2, Black Swan. And at number 1, rightfully, is Rosemary's Baby.
I can't believe that neither version of Maniac got on there. I would probably have put the newer Maniac on rather than the original one. But, like, yeah, that's a very New York one. They're like, yeah, that doesn't get on, but, like, Black Swan, which arguably isn't a horror, does. And also, I suppose it is a horror, but the thing I didn't like with Black Swan, for the record, is one of the problems with Darren Aronofsky as a writer, I think, is the way that he handles symbolism, which is that he doesn't. You know, in this case, you got the guy going like, yeah, you're pure, so you can play the White Swan, but you know what? You haven't got in touch with your dark side, which would let you play the Black Swan. She's like, and then like ends up getting in touch with her dark side by shagging another woman. You're like, that's strangely homophobic, right? But like, I don't know. I just couldn't get into that movie. I thought
Mila Kunis brought out the best in her.
I think it washed out bits like an SNL sketch. You know? But I tell you what, the ballet looked very impressive. Natalie Portman did a great performance as well. So yeah. And also, we didn't have like Driller Killer. Probably could have been another one. It's just, I mean, Driller Killer isn't good, but it's very, very New York, you know?
Yeah, there are a lot of films where it feels like the city is a character as much as anyone else. And at least half of those could be set anywhere.
Yeah, like Eyes Wide Shut couldn't really be set anywhere else. You know, same with Basket Case is a kind of very sleazy side of New York in it. But yeah, anyway, who am I to complain about the list? Thank you all very much for joining us on yet another visit to the Scream franchise. Guys, thank you very much for being my co-host this evening. And we wish you all a fond farewell and goodbye. Bye.
See ya.
Yeah.
For news, views, and reviews, check out HorrorCultFilms.co.uk. Music by White Bat Audio.